In the village of Gada, the earth does not just hold the dead, it birthed the living. Gada sat in a valley of deep, hematite red clay, a place where the air always tasted of wood smoke and sun-baked earth. Here, the potters were not merely craftsmen, they were the keepers of the spirit. In Gada, it was believed that a human soul was as fragile as a breeze, and without a vessel to hold it, a person would simply drift away into the tall savanna grass. This was the law of the soul jars. When a child took their first gulp of air, the master potter would be waiting with a freshly turned clay vessel held open to the sky. As the infant wailed, that first precious breath was caught inside the jar and sealed with a plug of sacred beeswax. As long as the jar remained whole, the person remained strong. To break a jar was to break a life. Zanele was an apprentice whose hands were permanently stained the color of rust. At 19, she possessed a listening touch, a rare gift that allowed her to feel the structural integrity of clay before it ever touched the kiln. She was a woman of quiet intensity, her dark skin glowing like polished mahogany, her eyes sharp and observant beneath a crown of short, copper-dyed twists. While the other apprentices gossiped by the river, Zanele spent her nights in the Great Kiln, a massive dome structure of soot-stained brick that breathed heat like a sleeping dragon. Her master, a man named Mazi, was the oldest potter in the valley. His back was hunched like a mountain ridge, and his fingers were gnarled roots, but his ears were keen. "Listen, Zanele," Mazi would whisper as the fire roared. "A healthy jar hums. It breathes with the owner. If the soul is happy, the clay is warm. If the soul is sick, the jar sweats." One evening, while Zanele was organizing the drying racks, rows upon rows of terracotta jars representing every soul in Gada, she noticed a draft of cold air coming from behind a heavy mahogany screen. Her curiosity, always a restless thing, pushed her to slide the screen aside. Behind it lay a staircase carved into the very floor of the valley, leading deep into the cool, damp earth. She descended into a hidden cellar that smelled of ancient rain and damp stone. There, she found the unclaimed jars. There were hundreds of them. Unlike the smooth, silent vessels on the racks above, these jars were covered in intricate, pulsing terracotta patterns that moved like living veins. And they were loud. The cellar was filled with a low, vibrating thrum, a chorus of thousands of tiny, muffled voices, whispering in a language of sighs and stutters. These were the jars of the unborn, souls that had been caught but never assigned to a body. "Why are you kept in the dark?" Zanele whispered, her fingers hovering over a jar that glowed with a faint bioluminescent amber light. "Because silence is a luxury the powerful cannot afford," a sharp, cold voice rang out. Zanele spun around to find Chief Boro standing at the foot of the stairs. Boro was a man of immense physical presence, his shoulders broad as a baobab trunk, draped in heavy, charcoal-colored kente cloth. His eyes were like twin pits of obsidian, reflecting nothing. In his hand, he carried his own soul jar, a vessel of such perfect polished black clay that it looked like it had been carved from the night sky itself. "Chief Boro," Zanele stammered, bowing low. I heard the humming." Boro stepped closer, the heat of his anger clashing with the chill of the cellar. "These jars are the reserve, girl. They are the extra breaths that keep Gada stable, or so the people are told." Zanele looked at the chief's black jar. She realized with a jolt of horror that it was silent. It didn't hum. It didn't breathe. It was a hollow, dead thing. "Your jar is empty," Zanele gasped, her listening touch sensing the void within the black clay. "You aren't using your own breath. You're draining them." Boro's face contorted. "A leader must live longer than a commoner to ensure the village survives. I have sat in this chair for 80 years because I know how to siphon the hum from the unclaimed. I am Gada. If I wither, the valley withers." "No," Zanele said, her voice growing steady. "The valley is withering because of you. The clay is turning brittle. The children are born tired, because you are stealing the morning from their lungs before they even arrive." Boro lunged, his massive hands reaching for her throat, but Zanele was a creature of the kiln. She dodged his grasp, her nimble feet finding purchase on the slick clay floor. She grabbed a heavy iron poker from the wall. "If you touch me, I will shatter every jar in this room," she threatened, pointing the iron at the vibrating, unclaimed vessels. "The chorus will be freed, and your silence will be heard by everyone." Boro froze. The power of Gada rested on the secret of the jars. If the people knew their chief was a soul thief, the hematite red earth would run with more than just clay. You are an apprentice," Boro hissed. "No one will believe a girl whose hands are caked in mud." "They won't have to believe my words," Zanele replied. "They will hear the song." The next morning was the festival of the first breath, the day when the village gathered to celebrate the year's new life. Chief Boro stood on the high stone dais, his black jar held high, a symbol of his supposed eternal strength. The villagers cheered, their own jars hanging from their belts, humming in a beautiful, disorganized harmony. Zanele emerged from the Great Kiln, carrying not a new jar, but a massive, unbaked slab of wet clay. She walked to the center of the square, her mahogany skin glistening with sweat and soot. "People of Gada," Zanele cried, her voice cutting through the cheers. "The chief says his jar is the heart of our village. I say his heart is a tomb." She slammed the wet clay slab onto the stone altar. Using her listening touch, she hummed a specific, resonant frequency, the same note she had heard in the cellar. The wet clay acted as a conductor. Suddenly, a sound erupted from beneath the ground, a roar of 1,000 sighs, a gale of trapped voices that shook the very foundations of the huts. The chief's black jar began to vibrate. Cracks of brilliant amber light snaked across its obsidian surface. Boro screamed, clutching the vessel, but the stolen breaths were too strong. The beeswax plug shot out like a pebble from a sling, and a whirlwind of glowing, ethereal vapor spiraled out of the jar, returning to the earth. The black jar shattered into 1,000 pieces of dead soot. Chief Boro didn't die instantly. Instead, he began to age in seconds. His broad shoulders slumped, his skin turned the color of ash, his obsidian eyes dimmed into grey pebbles. He fell to his knees, a man finally meeting the time he had stolen. The silence that followed was not the heavy, suffocating silence of a grave. It was the clean, fresh silence of a new morning. The unclaimed jars in the cellar had been felt by everyone in the village. They knew now that their lives were their own, and that no leader had the right to bottle the wind. Mazi, the old potter, stepped forward and placed a hand on Zanele's rust-stained shoulder. "The kiln is yours now, Seeker. The jars must be turned again, but this time, leave them unsealed. A soul is not a prisoner." Zanele looked at her hands. They were still red with clay, but for the first time, she felt the hum of the entire valley beneath her feet. She didn't forge a new jar for herself. She simply took a deep breath of the wood smoke-scented air and let it go. Gada remained a village of potters, but they became the village of the open vessel. And they say that if you walk through the hematite red valley at sunset, you can still hear the air singing. Not because it is trapped in clay, but because it is finally, beautifully free.